Well, welcome back to our videos on using Project Libre. Stepping back, the first unit, we looked at the tool in general, and we talked about how to set up tasks. And moving into Unit 2, we developed those tasks further. We worked on summarization of tasks, where you can take a group of tasks and say they all are associated with each other, and create a roll-up of those in a summary. And that is what we see in the top one, called Project Plan Development. And indeed, if you click on the little box icon there, it rolls it up. And then when you want to bring it back up, you click on it and it will get it to reappear. And it takes a few moments for it to update. And there we go. We also talked about how we tie them together because, as an example, you have to have a overall scope of what you're going to do before you can have team meetings and then start to coordinate your project. You can't start designing it until you've had some planning, an overall project planning session. In this case, several sessions. We defined the scope, the department team meetings, project coordination, and then a milestone called project launch. Now, I'll come back to milestones in a moment, but notice how they're linked together. You can see that defined scope has to take place before the department team meeting can start, and then you can't have the project coordination until the team meetings take place, and then the team comes together as a whole to talk about coordinating the plan. Once that completes, a milestone, project launch, and then we can move into the design phase. Now, one thing we didn't talk about this in Unit 2, but we'll mention it right now, and that is that milestones, there are two of them here. The first one is the project launch under project plan development. And then the second one is under prototype development, and it is prototype completion. And the milestones have zero value to them. That is, there's no duration. You can have duration with them. Let's just say, and we'll just do it here, we're going to give the project completion a 3-day duration, and let's see what happens to it. And you can see that it completed, but because we gave it 3 days, it pushed itself out 3 days. Now, why would you do that? I'm going to set this back to 0 again. And one of the reasons that you might do that is because of the fact that you could have an activity that takes place in association with a milestone. So as an example, maybe a luncheon, or you have a meeting, a post completion meeting that's associated with the milestone, and maybe that meeting is 3 hours long, and if it was, then it will consume some time. Most milestones don't have time associated with them, a duration. They just happen at a certain day, a certain point in time, let's say. And based on the effect of all of the pieces of the plan or the project and all the tasks that are associated with it, when you place those milestones along that path, they will be associated with a specific date when they would take place based on the time of all of the tasks that precede the milestone. Now, one other thing to note here is the color coding. You have both red lines and blue lines. Now, the black lines, we've seen that before. That's the designated indicator for the roll-ups or the summarization of tasks. The red lines, notice how they waterfall spread out, where some of the blues are in parallel. Now, they are also in parallel with red lines, but the difference is that blue lines don't affect the overall time it takes for a project to complete, where there are some tasks that are driving certain things, and until they complete, there is some task associated with it which cannot take place even if others associated with a specific task are completed. And the best example of that is the engineering design phase. You can see that under engineering design, both the mechanical design and the manufacturing design do not drive the design meeting that needs to take place after the complete engineering design is over. And so you'll notice that the one that does drive the whole engineering design phase is electrical. Because of that, it becomes a task that has a great deal of impact on the project. We call that critical path. Now I'm going to make a change here. Watch what happens. So let's say instead of 10 days, it only takes, instead of 15 days, it only takes 10 days to do the electrical design. Now look what happened to the critical path. Instead of electrical now, mechanical is the task that drives the whole phase, the whole design process. It did pull back the date for the beginning of the design meeting, but that's because we assigned a different duration to electrical. Electrical no longer drives the whole design process. Now mechanical does. So let's change that back then again to 15, just because it makes sense to do that, to keep it the way it was. And notice again, after the software updates, the critical path changed again. Critical path becomes important when projects are have certain time frames that management might like them to complete. And in the process of designing a whole project to plan it out, you find that it won't meet maybe the timeline management was expecting, and you need to find out where the critical path is. What's driving this? Could you go back to electrical and say, look, electrical team, what is it that you determined is 15 days worth of work? And they come back and say, well, you know, we've looked at it, and there's just some things that are going to impact the project, and we have to do these things. We have no way around them. Well, okay, if that's the case, then maybe there's no way around it. Sometimes, maybe, especially once the project starts, it launches, and now you're not planning anymore. You're tracking progress, and as you start to get actual numbers, that is, let's say that under circuit prototype, let's say that the system board, let's just use the storage unit as an example. The storage units it'll take 5 days to prototype. And let's say that they run into a problem, and now instead of 5 days, it's taken 10 days. Well, it impacts a bunch of things. It impacts, first off, it impacts the budget, because if it took them twice as long to do it, then that means that their piece is going to probably cost twice as much. Now, it's possible that maybe it doesn't cost quite as much. Maybe during the first 5 days, 3 people were involved, but then because there was something that didn't work out right, one person finishes the work on the storage unit, and so it will drive the length of the task out, but it may not actually cost twice as much money. That gets into all kinds of budgeting issues. But there are times when critical path becomes pretty important, and I worked on a project one time. It got way behind. It just ran into all kinds of problems. And we were running critical path every week, checking to see what was actually causing the project to continue to move to the right. By move to the right, I mean it was taking longer. And critical path actually changed. It depended on several factors. And so, you're working away and everything's going along fine. Then all of a sudden you realize, okay, now I've put actuals in here and oh my goodness, it's not ending in December. It's now ending at the end of January. Where's the critical path? And sometimes it's just one item. So let's say that storage unit really created a problem. Let's say that instead of 5 days, it became 30 days. I mean, it just was a problem. And now watch what happens. It was a big change. We forced it all the way out to the end of December by doing that, when originally it was only supposed to be 5 days. Now, granted, this was a plan, so we'll make it 5 days again. So you can see the value of using a project management tool. There are a lot of, another example, by the way, there's another example here. So let's say that the system people, we expected them to start on the 17th of November, but they came back and said there's no way. They can't start until the 17th of December. So again, that forces the issue out. And now look what happened to the critical path. Because one group could not start at a reasonable time with everybody else, the critical path is just that item now. All the other items are capable of being done well before the 17th of December, and because of that, critical path is no longer driven by the project plan and the engineering design phase. And you say, well, now wait a minute, why wouldn't they? They have to be done before storage unit starts. But because storage unit already knows they can't get it done until starting the 17th of December, the critical path for the rest of it is no big deal anymore. Now, if we change this back, we go back to what we had, and it takes a few moments for it to update, and then once it does, we're back to where we were. So that you can see there's a lot of different things that can happen here to help us in designing a project. Now, this is a plan. We haven't started actually implementing the plan. This is just the plan. Now let's shift gears and move into resources, because we haven't applied any resources to this project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on that left-hand item called resources. We haven't applied any. We haven't given this project any resources, people, materials, or anything like that. So let's start with a project manager, and we'll put that in. And notice by default it picks work. Now there are some other types of resources. As you can see, not only is work there, but also material. Let's talk about the difference. Work generally is the effort made by those people assigned to a project, where materials can be anything from, let's say, in the prototype stage, under the circuit board, they needed some parts, and so they have to charge those parts off to the project, and they have to become a part of the schedule, and so. We can assign work right now. I'm sorry, materials. Right now, all we're going to do is assign work. Now, with that said, I could tell you right now that if you look over under the column initials, it created P for program manager because there's no other items in there. But let's say that we put in a programmer, And now we have two of the same initials, and the initials are important. You'll see why a little bit later. So in this case, we're gonna change. First I'm going to take programmer out because we may not actually have one. But what we're going to do here is we are going to, and let me delete that one right there. We're going to make sure that this comes out different later, because we might need to be able to determine the difference between a couple of resources that all begin with the letter P. So it's work. We've changed the initials. This person, we got one person, one project manager, which is not unusual. And let's just say that in this case, we aren't going to get too complicated. This person will associate 100% of their work time to this project, and we're going to give them an $80 amount rate. Now, I do want to make a comment about rates. When you're dealing with rates in setting up resources in a project, there's a difference between how much they actually get paid per hour and how much the company actually has to pay to employ that person. If you're familiar at all with burdening rates or with bonuses or with benefits that a person gets, if I pay somebody $60 an hour, it may be costing me $70 or $75 or $80 an hour. So I pay them $60 an hour, but it may cost me $80 an hour to employ them, because not only am I paying them $60 an hour, but I have to pay Social Security, the employer's half of Social Security, and there may be health benefits, and there's vacation and holidays and all that. So you have to calculate all those benefits, and then you use what's called a burdened rate, and you have to calculate that. That's what cost accountants do a lot of. In organizations with lots of projects, there may be a person in the accounting department who puts all these numbers together, and then when you say, okay, I'm going to need a project manager, how much does that cost per hour? And they come back with 80 per hour, and they say that's the burdened rate. Well, for a full cost of a project, you really have to know the burdened rate. Yeah, I could put 60 an hour in here if I wanted to, per hour. All right, whoops, it's not going to like that because I'm doing something that I don't want to do here. Let's eliminate that, make that 60. If I make it 60 an hour, that's fine, but it isn't the actual real cost of using that person. And that might be on the high side, but let's just assume the project manager does make quite a bit. We'll assume that the burdened rate then in this case is, I gotta go back up here, is 80 an hour. And we'll consider that burdened rate. Now this is a person who is probably salaried, and so there would not be an overtime rate. Let's add a couple of people in here. We'll add design engineer, because of the fact that we have several of them, and we aren't going to break them out. Oh, I can't even spell right. We aren't going to break these out as different types. We'll just create design engineer, and I'm going to make this DE. Okay, well, I have DDE. It's sometimes it doesn't like. I'm trying to do it on the fly, and it doesn't like all that. Now, let's say that we have one of these and they're at 100%, but let's say that they've got several projects, and so we really aren't going to get them for 100% of the time. We're only going to get them for 50% of the time, and the burden rate is 50 an hour. Okay. Design engineers have a lot of skills, and so it may be very possible that it's 50 an hour. And then we're going to have and we'll call it a cost accountant. We're going to have a cost accountant who is more than a cost accountant, but we'll just call him that. And we'll make it CA for cost accountant. And again, all of these are work. This cost accountant is, again, let's consider the fact that this person is only 50% of the time. And let's assume that they burdened are 35 an hour. So we have 3 people in here, and for the moment, we'll leave it at that. We have 3 resources, okay? All of them standard rate, no overtime. Well, let's just say that just for fun, the cost accountant isn't salaried. Let's just say the cost accountant isn't salaried. So typically time and a half. Now, again, what they would typically do is say 35. Well, to make it easy on myself, let me make this 30 an hour, and then it makes it easier over here because time and a half would then be 45 an hour, okay? Yep, not a valid rate. That's because of the fact that it doesn't like what I did here. Oh, I gotta get this to, it doesn't like the way I'm doing this here with just trying to hover over it. There we go. 45 an hour. So they have an overtime rate. Now, I'm not going to use the overtime rate in our calculations here, but this is the actual amount for the cost accountant. Notice that there is a resource information pop-up box that you can have. Makes it sometimes a little easier to work with. You saw some of the issues I was having. And notice there's the rates. Resource availability, only 50% of the time. All right. By the way, notice that we have assigned no tasks to this person yet. And we don't have any notes here. And you can keep notes, and notes can be very helpful, particularly if things change. So maybe the cost accountant rate changed partway through the project, and you want to make note of that. You can keep notes about what you've done. So we've got a couple people in here that are working the project, and we're going to assign them to each of the tasks. Now, we might assign them to some tasks, maybe not to others. So let me go back to my tasks and go to my chart. There we go. And I'm going to take each one of these items here, and I am going to apply a resource to it. So let me start again by going. Here I go to define. Now, by the way, I'm not applying the resources to the roll-up, to the summary, only to the task itself. So I double-click on that, window opens, and notice resource. I am going to add a resource, and I'm going to add the project manager as 100% of the time that's associated with this task. And I'm going to assume that that person is going to work the full 16 hours on this and nobody else. Now, notice that this is something that's very helpful. As the Gantt chart builds, as we add resources, the resources assigned to a specific task are included in the Gantt chart. Very helpful when you print these things out. In fact, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So let's go to the second item. Now, in this case, we know that there's more than one resource that's going to be assigned. Again, the project manager, we're going to assign the project manager, but in this case, we're only going to assign the project manager for 25% of the time, because during the department team meetings, they may not be working fully, but we have several teams groups here. So we're going to assign design engineers, and we're going to assign 200%. Actually, we got a couple of departments, so let's make it 300%. And then the cost accountant will assign for 25% of the time. Okay. Now we have several people who are working on this project. Now, notice something that took place, and in just a moment, well, let me just say, before I say notice something, let's talk about it, and then we'll come back to it. The issue here is that we have several design engineers that are being assigned to this project. And so the department team meetings are going to go off, and they're going to do these department team meetings. And when we said, well, we need 3 of them, so we assigned 300%, look what it did to our department team meeting task. Shortened it. So what happens is the system says, oh, you assign 3 people so they could do the work in less time. Not necessarily. So we run into a little problem here, but let's take a look first at project manager cost accounting. All of them are now here. So project manager, we added the project manager, we added the design engineers, or the engineer. We tried to make it 3 of them, and that's not working. So we're going to come back and revisit that. And then we did the cost accountant for 25% of the time. And they will work those, and their costs are going to be associated with that. Now, how do we fix this problem with the team meeting manager? So one possibility is that we can't let the system fiddle with the actual days it's going to take to do this. So we originally, right now, to double check ourselves, let's take the engineer. Well, we can't even do that, because if we do that, then it says the project manager can do it and get it all done. So we said this was going to take 5 days, I think it was. What we have to do here is go in and say, you know what? It's not effort driven, fixed units, and let's go to 5 days and say, okay, it's going to take 5 days to do this. Oops, days, there we go. There we go, and invalid because I'm doing something a little different here. There we go, now we're right. So now, notice, if we go back, and I'll go through this in a moment again, the resources are changed because the way the system does this by default, if you assign 3 people to a task of a certain number of time, let's say 5 days, but we assign 3, it says, oh, you can do the work in a shorter time. Well, we said we couldn't do that. So what we did was we said, you know what? It's not effort driven. That is, this task is not driven by throwing resources at it to shorten the period. It's going to take 5 days for these team meetings to take place. And those people are going to work for those 5 days. Okay? So, we uncheck the effort-driven box, make sure this is fixed units, and then what's going to happen, it forces this to be a full 5 days. Okay? Now, let's just see for fun what's going on here. And so one of the things that we want to do is go to View, and we want to click on Projects. And you can see that this project has now added hours of work and has added a cost to produce this project or make this project work already, $8,300. So just to do the planning stage, has cost us $8,300. Let's go back to the Gantt chart again. And just for fun, let's open up project plan development. Now this does not have costs associated at the moment because it doesn't work that way. So let me open it up to find. Here we can see the exact cost for a specific for specific work done. So if you have 2 8-hour days at $80 an hour, that's going to be $1,280. Let's double check ourselves, make sure that we're actually getting that number. And if we're not, because you always say to yourself, okay, is this right? And it is. So if you have 16 hours worth of work, 2 days worth of work at $80 an hour, $1,280. So it's $1,280 just for the project manager to sit down and work through the scope. The design team, and this is where you can start to look at things like, wow, $7,100. Well, you've got the project manager working a quarter of his time or her time. You have the cost accountant working a quarter of his or her time. Then you have 3 design engineers working 5 days in their design or department team meetings to develop their plan of action. Okay, and then when all's said and done, they come back together again, and we haven't assigned anything to that yet. Okay, so let's assign to the project coordination, and in this case, we will open it up and we'll go to resources, and we're going to say the project manager is going to be 100% of their time. Each design engineer is going to work about 25% of their time over the 2 days, because they don't have to do the extra work. The project manager's got 2 days of coordination, but he's meeting with these design engineers, but they're only doing about 20% of their time. So now, because of that, it shortens it by a few hours, which is great. We just saved some time. So now if we go back to general, we can see that we've added some people. It's now costing us for that task alone about $1,200. Okay. Now, at this point, we have some information here, which is very helpful. So let's just add some resources. So we're going to add now. Let's add some resources so it makes it a little better at this point. So I'm going to go back to resources, click on that resource tab, click on resources, and I'm going to add a mechanical engineer. I forgot what the tasks were, so now I got to go back, which, by the way, is not unusual. I mean, come on, sometimes it happens. So we have mechanical, electrical, and manufacturing. Okay, so mechanical, electrical, and engineering. So we had a mechanical, we have an electrical, engineer, and we have, and I didn't spell it right, so let's get that squared away. And we have a manufacturing, and I'll just put MFG for this one just to make it easier on myself. And then we're gonna go ahead. Now here's a good example again. As soon as I click on this, notice it's M. There's 2 M's. Well, so we're going to have to do a little bit here differently. We'll use a MECE for mechanical engineer, and we'll use MFG, MFGE for manufacturing. See, and that's what happens when you're trying to type. It just gets me every time. There we go. And then I'm sorry, we'll take that one. We don't need this person. We've already got this person. No, we don't. Oh, I see what happened. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. This is an example of you're working away, you're doing all this stuff, and you're trying to do it while you're talking at the same time, and it doesn't always work. All right, there we go. Manufacturing engineer, and we'll just do an EE engineer. Triple E, electrical and electronics engineer. All right. Now, we've got specific engineers. Let's go back to our task. So we click on task, the task tab, and Gantt chart. There's various ways to get to it. I'm just using the easiest I can here. We know that mechanical is an engineer that does that. They're going to be doing this full time. And so we go to resources, we click on the little resource icon off to the side. We pick mechanical engineer, 100% of his time. We assign him, close. And then we do the same thing for for electrical. And you can see every time we do this, we click on the little icon off on the right here. We pick the engineer we want. Oops. I gotta pick the engineer. There we go. Assign. There he is. All right. Close. And now we do the manufacturing. And let's assume that when they come together at the end, they all have to be there, and that would make sense. And a 2-day meeting would not be unusual. So we'll add all of the engineers. Now there's only one issue. I got to go back and I got to add it in because I didn't do it yet. And that is I have to add in values for their costs. So let me go back to resource. And I did not give them an hourly rate. So let's do that. And just because it's easy, let's just make it $30 an hour. 30 an hour even, all the way down, just because it makes sense. Okay. Probably would be, my guess is because these are all, oh, stop doing that. It's because of the way I'm trying to do this and doesn't like that. There we go. Now it'll work. Let's just assume they're all the same, okay? And we won't give money overtime either. We'll just leave it that way. We're just trying to demonstrate here. All right, now back to task, back to Gantt chart. We've given them values. Notice that it includes their names off to the right. Now, if you start, look what happens here where we've got design meeting. And we got to go, by the way, notice because of the way we did this, it shortened it, but we got to say, no, it's not event driven. It is fixed units and it's a 2-day affair. So don't go cheating on me here is what we're trying to say. I got to get back up here and fix this. It doesn't like what I did. Oh, no, don't do that to me. Oh, this is great. It deleted some stuff. There we are. We're back again. All right. There's a little bit of a delay in the processing, and that's fine. Okay, so now we're back to a 2-day event. There we go. And notice we've got 2 days of meetings after the design is done. So let's take a look now at the total cost of the project. So if we go to view and we go to report, and we're going to get a, this is a schedule of the durations, but I want to look at projects. And now you can see under this project, the total cost. And by the way, what I did here is I'm double clicking on the project itself and the window opens for just this project. And notice that the statistics show us that we're $21,000 into the project. Okay. So far it says it's taken 60 days, 812 hours of work. And by the way, notice this item here. This is kind of interesting. The remaining work. We're planning right now. We're not actually starting the work yet. We're just planning it. So although we have 812 hours worth of work we've planned, we haven't actually started anything. So it says we still have 812 to go. And you can notice down here, actual cost and so on. All that would change once we started to track this project. Okay. Back to the Gantt chart. And now we have activities that are assigned resources. A little change took place here, and that is that the summary, it forced out the workload here. And part of the reason for that is because of the way we've used the resources. We only have one engineer that can handle, there are 3 engineers that can handle things. And we got people working this project, but because of the way it's set up right now, it forced this out. And it doesn't have to, but if we were to assign different resources to it, would pull this back. But right now, we got all these people working on this, and nobody can get started on these things because they're all tied up doing other things. So once we started adding resources to the project, then we could better control when some of these things start. So that's a look at costs related to a project. Most times it's a project uses people, but a good example of using materials and other assets or resources. I taught a class where the project being used for the example was the shooting of a movie. And so you had a number of different people, actors, and you had the director, and you had the cameramen and sound people and so on. But then you had to lease a camera. You had to lease a special truck. You had lunches you had to provide the actors and the crew at lunchtime every day, and you had a film, or you had special devices to store the video signal. You had recording equipment. You had hotel reservations that you might have if this was being done remote on location someplace. And so you would add all those in. We haven't done that here, but you could have a situation where you have to add in materials, because if you don't, you could do it. You could do it by adding them in after the fact, but it's nice to have them scheduled, because if something changes, you can do it inside the project management software, and it'll account for it automatically, including time. Because let's say that you leased a camera, and you had just one camera in there, and that's what you added in after the project, after all the workers were put in, and then you just threw the camera on top of the cost. Well, what if on a couple of days you actually had to get a second camera because you had 2 different shootings going at the same time, two different locations where they were doing filming? Well, it would be easier to do it in the project management tool than it would be to add it in. You have to go back out, add it in a spreadsheet someplace, then take that value and add it in someplace else, and then the next thing you know, you finally have your cost. If you put everything in here, guess what? It's all there, and it's all accounted for. Not only is it accounted for time-wise, but it's accounted for cost-wise. Now I'm going to save this, and we will be looking in the next session at reporting, and we will also look at some other areas of the reporting where we can look at the number of resources and task usage, how the tasks, right now they're in a Gantt chart, but there's information in each of them, and we'll be looking at different reporting that can be done that helps us when we're building out a project.